Hello again, everybody. I've been making a lot of videos recently about the UK, life in the UK, travelling outside of the UK, everything to do with the UK, because those are the sorts of videos that seem to do immensely well. You guys obviously like seeing them. But I want to speak today about an experience that I've had, which I've spoken about already, travelling around specifically Eastern Europe and coming back to the UK. When I came back here around about 2 weeks ago, a lot of things were visibly different. Despite only being the other side of Europe, which is not that far in the context of the whole world, it is in a lot of ways, I think, a different culture from what I've seen. Of course, a lot of things are very relatable, very understandable, and it would be a lot more different if you went somewhere like, let's say, parts of Africa or parts of Asia. With that being said, coming back to the UK, whilst I did notice some things which were objectively worse, there were a lot of things which are unimaginably better. And I think as a UK-born citizen, resident, whatever, you can take the luxuries that we have for granted. And you can fail to understand how privileged we are living here. Now, of course, not all parts of the world are poorer than the UK. A lot of parts are richer. We don't need to go into exact countries and points like that, but I want to make a big point here. The amount of personal wealth that can be developed in the UK is still very good. And we talk about opportunities in the UK, we talk about opportunities in the West and all that sorts of subject. People like to make out like they're getting worse. I think what it really is that they're changing. I think the dynamics are changing. For example, talk about like boomers. They may have had access to a lot cheaper housing proportionally and a lot of benefits in careers, but think about what we have now. We have access to global business. We have access to making money online in numerous ways. We have access to remote work, all of these different things. And I know these are not UK exclusive, but what I'm trying to say here is we have different times. Now, bringing this back to my focused point of the UK, and why life in the UK is not what we think. When we live here for the majority of our lives, and when we see the sort of content which is going around on the media, like, the UK is dying, the economy's doing bad, this and that, and everything that's wrong with the UK, we have a complete right to acknowledge problems. If we don't acknowledge them, there's a strong argument for the fact that they might get worse. At the same time, there is definitely an emphasis placed on how bad the UK is. And I think if we actually look up the odds fairly, take away any biases, when it comes to building a business, when it comes to career progression, the best place to be is going to be somewhere in the West for most jobs, for most careers. I'm not going to say specifically the UK, but I'm seeing a lot of this, bashing of the West, as it's called, or the UK. Look, there's a lot of good jobs here. There's a lot of social mobility potential here. And I think it's only when you travel to a significantly less well-off country, or a poorer country, whatever you want to call it, that you actually realise this in its truest sense. When you travel to a country where you can see that the cars are visibly significantly worse, when you travel to a country and you cannot really recognise many big brands in terms of offices, and you look up the pay, obviously it's all relative because the cost of living in the UK is very high, so less money could go further elsewhere. And by the way, before we go any deeper on this, I understand that there's going to be some people who say, well, I have an online business and I can live in Thailand, or I can live in... Look, obviously it's a very nuanced argument. There are going to be people who can live a better life in Eastern Europe. There's going to be people who can live a life in Africa that's better. There's going to be people who can live a life in Asia that's better. Of course there is. But the general reality for most people's situation is most people are 9-to-5 workers, they don't have skills that can be moved abroad, and so on. So we're going to talk about the majority rather than the minority. I run a business, I could move elsewhere. Could there be better opportunities for that elsewhere in terms of business? Maybe, maybe not. That's a different topic. Whether there are better opportunities or not, access to healthcare being free, the ability to generally have quite good free speech, the ability to, again, move up in terms of social class, in terms of net worth, the ability to build a business that works. And I know that there might be better environments for that, but these all can be done here in the UK. Naturally, when we see challenges ahead, we have two arguments, two potentials. We can talk about how we can adapt to them, or we can talk about how it means that the country's failing, or whatever you want to say. And I feel like, unfortunately, the majority of people have gone down that avenue rather than looking at the brilliant advantages here. I don't know if I could have been as successful as I am, and as successful as I aim to be, if I wasn't born in the UK. I'm not going to lie. We speak one of the most globally adopted languages, which is a massive advantage for business. I was speaking to somebody whilst I was over there in Eastern Europe, actually, because everyone speaks English, or most people. If you need to speak English in a lot of big cities, of course it's not true for everywhere. If the person who you're speaking to doesn't speak it, the second person might. So a lot of people were speaking English. And I said, why does everyone here speak English? Then they start to think about it. Well, it's the language of business. It's where the richest countries oftentimes are. Like America, like the UK, being two, for example. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say this. Before you make an argument for the UK is the worst country, look at the reality of the situation. We can look at maybe some parts of the US that are doing better. We can look at maybe some parts of Europe that are doing better. And we should acknowledge where the country isn't doing so well. And we should be able to discuss how we can improve that. But what we need to do really, and what I think not enough people understand, is how privileged they are to live somewhere like the UK. I'm not going to say it's perfect, because it's not, but what country is? There are some things about the UK that people won't like. There's some things about the UK that I won't like. But that's going to be true everywhere. There's going to be some people for where somewhere else will be a better place to live. We've been through all of that. But what I am going to say is this as a concluding point. And let me try and sum this up in a very, very good way, or a very powerful way. For your average person, they're not going to have a better life. And this is your average person, not the exceptional business owner or anything like that. They're not going to have a better life in some of the places that they think that they might, because they've not crunched the numbers or viewed their opportunities fairly or properly. Every place comes with its benefits and drawbacks. And if you build a business, and it's online, it's remote, or if you can get remote work, of course your answer might be different. But this idea that you can't make anything for yourself in the UK anymore, and everything's unaffordable and everything's undoable, we have a lot of first world privileges here, and a lot of people take them for granted. They take them for granted. Access to good healthcare, relatively good food, good education, safe, and it is compared to a lot of places, safe cities and streets is a privilege. Are some of these things getting worse? Yes. Can we acknowledge that? Yes. In the advent of trying to make a fair, balanced argument, can I agree to that? Yes. Of course I can. It's the truth. Inflation is very high, or it has been. Markets, in terms of housing and food, are arguably out of whack. But even then, are they out of whack, considering how many people demand housing? Or are they just ridiculously high due to the fact that houses haven't been built? What I'm trying to say is, I'm making a video like this, and I know a lot of you guys are going to judge what I have to say in regards to everything based on 10 minutes worth of content, when in reality I've made hundreds of videos, tens of videos on these subjects. But whilst you may not get the message fully, what I want to conclude on is this. I understand that there are a lot of problems here in the UK in 2025. I understand that things are getting worse in some ways, but I also understand, like a lot of people do, but also like a lot of people fail to understand, that we are in a very privileged country where a lot of things can work out well for us. So guys, next time you want to speak about opportunities elsewhere, or next time you want to say the UK is in decline or whatever, if you live in the UK specifically, view this realistically and think about where you would go elsewhere. If you want to improve the UK and you understand that, there's a good argument for that, that's powerful. But for a lot of these people who just want to bash the UK and don't understand the broader context, they need a wake-up call to how privileged this place is in a lot of ways. And a lot of these privileges we take for granted, which I think is a big part of why people see the UK as being the way it is, because they don't necessarily they don't necessarily value what they should to its fullest. Anyway guys, I don't really have any more to say on this. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, of course, and subscribe, and I hope I'll see you soon. goodbye. And again, if you can share this, please do. Thanks. And of course, leave your comments down below. See ya.